Solve a problem, get rich. Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. So I want to explain how to figure out a problem that can be solved and how to get rich by solving that problem. Very basic process here, and there are a couple of examples that will bring out the fact that it's fairly straightforward and almost anyone can do it. You just have to look at the process in a unique way, the process that's used to go from being an employee to becoming wealthy and having your own business. So starting at the top, you've got to find a problem to solve. Okay, you've got to find some problem that if you solve it, people will pay you. So there's a trap you can fall into, something that I was subject to. You shouldn't mislead yourself. You shouldn't come into this belief that it has to be a not obvious problem. I mean, for a long time, I knew this idea that, okay, if you want to amass wealth, you have to figure out a problem, solve it, and get paid for it. And it has to be a not very obvious problem, or the solution is not very obvious. That's BS. It turns out that was complete BS. But I actually believed that for a fair amount of time. Another mistaken belief that I had, and I think a lot of people have, there's only a few problems left to solve. There aren't that many problems left to solve, and that means I'm going to have a hard time finding one to solve because there aren't that many left. That's also BS. This is very similar to what the head of the patent office said. I think it was in the early 1900s. The head of the U.S. Patent Office said that almost everything's been invented. There's not much left to invent, at the beginning of the 1900s. So this is a trap you can fall into. So yes, you have to solve a problem that people will pay you for if you have a good solution, and you can get rich by doing that. But don't mislead yourself that it has to be a not obvious problem and that there's only a few problems left to solve. So I want to start by pointing out what familiarity means, how familiarity works. Sometimes when you learn a new skill, it may not be something that you can see yourself enjoying. It's something you have to do for whatever reason. As an example, first graders start on the path to learning how to write, how to read, and how to write. And a lot of first graders, second graders, I guess, they're not really told the motivation other than having their parents tell them you have to attend school. But a 6-year-old, they rarely understand why they're going to a classroom and learning all these skills, reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's just that they have to be there and they have to learn it. So initially, you can have some contempt for those kinds of tools, like language and math. There could be some contempt. As an example, in math class, a lot of people have contempt for math. True story. A lot of people, how many people do you know who graduated college with a degree they majored in math? Not too many. But if you become familiar with something, it will start to feel like an old friend. As an example, if you are an adult and you don't know math, just imagine how hard your life would be. Trying to figure out if you have enough money in your bank account. Can you add up all the bills you owe each month? Is there enough money in your bank account to pay your bills? So math is initially held in contempt by a lot of students, but it becomes an old friend. After a while, you don't even think about disliking it. It's a tool, right? So math class, there's initial contempt, some students anyways, but math is the language of business. If you want to get rich, you have to set aside contempt of math because it's a tool, and you can learn by becoming familiar with it. It will start feeling like an old friend. You have to open your mind a little bit and say, I'm not really a fan of some subjects like accounting or math or finance, but it's the language of business, and I want to get rich, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people want to get rich. In my opinion, you can't have too much money. You really cannot have too much money because you can help a lot of people. Everyone in your family, charities, you can become a philanthropist. You can't have too much money. There's absolutely nothing wrong with getting rich. But you've got to take up some things that you may have contempt for. Math is a language of business. You've got to know math to get rich. And it's a tool. It's nothing more than a tool. And how many tools do you have? Reading and writing is a tool. And initially, students struggle with that. First graders struggle with that. But it becomes an old friend after a while. You stop thinking about whether you dislike it, and you use it constantly throughout your life. And life would be impossible without all the tools that we learn. Social skills, how to interact with people, math, language, and so on. The skills we learn for our career, maybe they were initially held in contempt, but they become an old friend after a while because of familiarity. The key is allow yourself the freedom to become familiar with something, and you will find when you come back to it later that it feels like an old friend because you know it, okay? So set aside contempt and dive in and become familiar with something, and you'll learn to like it. Some people say it that way. You'll learn to like this. So math is the language of money and business and investing. As an example, if you're a business owner, knowing microeconomics, the math of microeconomics and macroeconomics is pretty important if you're trying to figure out what's going on with your particular business. Microeconomics. If you're trying to figure out what's going on with consumer demand in the United States, that's macroeconomics. So knowing those two tools can help you understand your business and how the consumer is feeling about spending money. So again, math, a large part of microecon and macroecon mathematics. So you really have to embrace these things that are initially, what is this good for? It's good to, if you want to get rich, if you want to understand business and investing, understanding some of these tools will help you get there. And if you don't have them, it can be more difficult. So as an example, John D. Rockefeller got rich, as we all know, selling oil and gas. He was an oil man, right? Okay, so he did not grow up dreaming of selling oil and gas. That was not his life's goal when he was a kid growing up. He was an accountant. He was a bookkeeper. He wasn't even an accountant. He was a bookkeeper. A bookkeeper is sort of a step down from a full-blown accountant. Rockefeller was an employee. He was a bookkeeper. That's the language of business. If you learn how to be a good bookkeeper, you can look at a variety of businesses and know what's going on in that business. So that's a tool. Learning how to be a bookkeeper is a tool, and it's a tool of business. Cash flow, income and revenue, the balance sheet, assets, liabilities, language of business. It's a tool. So Rockefeller did not grow up dreaming of selling oil and gas, but that's how he got rich. And he got there because he saw an opportunity. He saw that the demand was growing for oil and gas. And so he jumped in because he understood business. He had a tool. He had the tool that allowed, bookkeeping, that allowed him to understand a business, how businesses work. And he saw something growing, and he dove in with his tool, his knowledge of business. And he didn't necessarily care about oil and gas. It was just a real growth industry at that time. And he jumped into it, and he took it to the limit, right? Another example, Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos got rich selling books online. Amazon, in the first few years, was nothing more than an online bookstore that sold books. That's all it was. It was a website that sold books. That's what Amazon was. Only later did they evolve Amazon so that you could buy and sell almost everything. In the beginning, when Amazon went public, he was mainly selling books. The bulk of their revenue was from book sales. Bezos got rich selling books. He did not grow up dreaming of being a bookseller. That was not his life's goal, his passion. It wasn't a part. So how did he end up getting rich from something he never even thought about growing up? So he was a financial analyst. The tools of business, the math to understand how a business is working, how the microeconomics of a business is working, how the macroeconomics of the economy in a country is working. What is consumer demand doing? Macroeconomics. So Bezos was a financial analyst, very similar in mission, sort of, at least related to Rockefeller being a bookkeeper. They were both involved in the language of business. So Bezos noticed that the internet was growing. So Rockefeller had the tools, the language of business. He saw a growth industry, oil and fuels. Bezos noticed the internet was growing. So what Bezos did, and what a lot of people have done over the years with the internet, is that they've realized there's a huge set of problems that are solved in conventional ways offline, not on the internet, that have been around for a long time. As an example, buying and selling vehicles, buying and selling cars. When the internet first became popular, started taking off, the idea of buying a car or a motorcycle or a van or a truck online, it would have been hard to believe that anyone would have thought that would have been a good idea. In the very beginning, in the 1990s, vehicle sales online, not what they are today. But nevertheless, the internet was growing, and Bezos he reasoned that all the problems that are being solved offline, like selling automobiles, selling books, can be moved online. And in the beginning, very few people thought that it was safe to put a credit card, to pay for something online with a credit card. And there are a lot of people, even today, that still do not want to buy stuff online. And for some, there are some good reasons for that. Because, when an internet website gets hacked and all the personal information, the credit card information of the customers leaks out into the dark web, that's a rational concern. I don't want to buy stuff online. There's a risk there, which is true. But back when he started Amazon, it was 100 times worse, more suspicious. People were very wary about putting credit card information online, buying stuff online. And a lot of early sales, like on eBay, took place by sending a check through the mail, not by putting a credit card on, paying with a credit card on a website. So, but Bezos, financial analyst, saw that the internet was growing at 2,300% a year. And he said, I'm going to take a problem currently being solved in the conventional way, a retail bookstore, and I'm going to move it online and have an online retail bookstore. So the idea was kind of slow to catch on. It did not take off immediately. Bezos got a lot of venture capital investment, and including some money from his parents. I think his parents gave him $250,000. They invested, they took a big risk because it wasn't clear when he started Amazon that selling books online was going to work because nobody was doing it. It was unproven. And again, people were hesitant. They were wary about buying stuff online with credit cards. But I think you get the idea. The whole thing is solve a problem, get rich. Selling books is solving a problem. Who would have thought, right? Because selling books, it's not a very sexy idea. But this was a new way to solve the problem. So it goes back to what I said at the beginning. You can mislead yourself and say, if I do get lucky and find a problem to solve that will help me get rich, it's probably going to be a non-obvious problem. That's wrong. Selling books is very obvious. Selling oil and gas in the beginning, Rockefeller, I believe, was selling oil for lamps because lighting came from oil lamps at that time. And so there was demand for oil and fuels for lighting. And so it's basically an innovative way to look at an existing problem and solve it in a unique way. Bezos, it's hard to turn away from a 2,300% growth rate, right? So there was a lot of opportunity there, not just with selling books. And so you shouldn't fall victim to this belief that you have to find some strange, unusual problem to solve to get rich. It can be a very conventional problem that's being solved and solve it in a new way, and that there's only a few problems left to solve. So try to imagine how many things are going to be invented that will use the internet to make people wealthy. Cryptocurrencies, for example, have not been around that long. And if you look at the price of Bitcoin when it first started and compare it to now, it's only been a few years, right? With Bitcoin, it has not been that long. In terms of people's lives, I mean, most of us were alive long before Bitcoin had existed, and the other cryptocurrencies, and they were not worth very much at all, and they were not respected. And now they are, because Wall Street and big finance is involved in the crypto industry. So basically, I wanted to get the point across: solve a problem. Don't fool yourself into thinking you have to be a genius and find some weird problem that nobody's solving. Bezos was not a genius selling books, right? Because it was a known problem. People like buying books. Let's sell them the books. That solves the problem. He just solved it in a unique way. He sold books online, and it didn't take off right away. It was a hard sell to get people to buy stuff online. That might be hard to believe, but it's true. So that's kind of the gist of the story here. Find a problem to solve, and you can become wealthy. Not sure what else to say about this, except the fact that you should be open to picking up a skill or learning a tool. Rockefeller did bookkeeping. Bezos was a financial analyst. Be willing to pick up something, a tool that maybe you couldn't see a value for. But if you're in business and you want to get rich, you've got to know math. It helps to know macro and microeconomics. It helps to know finance, and so on. If you want to become wealthy. If you expect to become wealthy and you don't know that, I'll give you an example. A lot of performance artists who think they're wealthy do not like math, do not like accounting, are not really into hard sciences in terms of numbers. They're artists. They have an artist mindset. When I started my career, I was a guitar player in rock bands. And I have to say that the business aspect of a music career does not play a role in your thinking in terms of how to become successful in a performing career. Performing career is all about looking good on stage and putting out good content, a good product. So a lot of performing artists, if they suddenly start looking into their financial situation, they will probably have a lot to learn, because, like I said, a lot of students have contempt for math. And you really have to set aside the artistic side of your brain and dive into the math to understand business. And anyways, if you have any questions about this, you can post in the comments. I hope this helped. I guess the main point was you don't have to find some unusual problem to solve. They're all over the place, and there's a gazillion of them. And you should understand how familiarity works and be willing to pick up new tools. They'll seem like an old friend after you practice them a little bit, and they have great utility. They come in really handy when you're trying to run a business and become wealthy. So you can post questions in the comments. I'll try to answer them. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and have a great day.